Alright, hello everybody. Today I'm going to be talking about getting started with and configuring, or ricing as a lot of people like to call it, BSPWM. So BSPWM is a really popular tiling window manager. I would say it's one of the most popular out there. And it stands for Binary Space Partition Window Manager. And if you don't know what that means, it doesn't really matter. All you need to know is how it works. So BSPWM is a tiling window manager, and it's a manual one at that. So what that means is there's two types of window managers out there. There's automatic tilers and manual tilers. So manual tilers would be something like BSPWM, where you get to sort of choose where everything goes. You can pre-select the ratios and stuff like that. So for example, if I wanted to open up one there, I could do that, and I can have all these terminals in exactly the way I want it. So that takes a little bit of time to open up everything, but it means you get more customization. An automatic tiler, on the other hand, would have a certain set of layouts that are pre-selected, so you can essentially just cycle through those layouts. So for example, if I had 4 terminals open, BSPWM, it has this layout by default. But Awesome Window Manager, for example, it has one where there's a bunch of them here, and then just one main window here. There's one where it's sort of like a corner layout, and you basically get to sort of just choose the layouts before you do it. So I prefer a manual tiler like BSPWM, which is why I use it, but a lot of people prefer automatic tilers. So BSPWM, when it comes to configuring it and using it, it's pretty different than your standard desktop environment like GNOME or KDE Plasma. It's mostly based off shortcuts or keyboard shortcuts. So for example, I have one to open a terminal, I want to close an app, I want to open my file manager, I want to open Firefox, etc. So also, it's pretty different when it comes to configuring them. So, with a desktop environment that's more fleshed out, like GNOME, for example, you configure everything in a GUI. But when it comes to most, if not all, tiling window managers, you configure everything in a dot file. So a dot file is essentially a file that starts with a dot, but more specifically, it's traditionally used for configuration files or things that you don't want to be in plain view. So most programs have a configuration file that you can edit, and that will change the look. So instead of going into a GUI, you would just edit it here. For example, if I wanted to decrease the window gap, I can just do that. So there's a few advantages and disadvantages to this approach. The main advantage is that you get a lot more control, and that the dot files are shareable with other people. So for example, my dot files are on my GitHub over here. If you go here, you can see that I have all of my configuration files, my wallpapers, etc. So if you ever wanted to take one of these, you can just go ahead and steal the code. So now that we have all the basic explanation out of the way, let's get started with installing all of the dependencies. So I am on Solus, which uses EOPackage as the package manager, but you can be on whatever distro you want, as long as it has support for all the packages. The main packages that we're going to want are BSPWM sxhkd, which is the hotkey daemon, which basically handles all of the keyboard shortcuts. Without it, you wouldn't be able to have those. Polybar for the nice bar at the top. You can see I have a clock and a workspace switcher, but you can have a lot more stuff. I went for a pretty minimal approach here. dmenu is a run prompt, which basically lets you run things really easily without having a bar at the top or the bottom. So I have a hotkey to basically just run whatever I want. So if I wanted to run Firefox, I would just do that, and there you go. You can also use RoFi, but I just prefer dmanual a lot more, and that's what I use. So if you wanted to use RoFi, you can find somebody else's tutorial on that. And also you obviously need a terminal emulator. I like to use urxvt or rxvt Unicode, just because it's nice, it's minimal, it's fast, and it's easy to configure. But you can go with whatever you want. The thing that I have right now is I'm using urxvt, and you can see it boots nice and fast. So let's go over the bspwmrc, or the bspwm config file. So by default, you're gonna realize that it doesn't have a lot of stuff. It's gonna be pretty basic, and yeah, there isn't very much. So once you, like, if you boot into, as soon as you boot into BSPWM, sorry, you're gonna be greeted by a black screen and a cursor, and you can't do anything. So that's where you need to handle the auto starting of things. So to auto start, it's pretty simple. You just have to put whatever you want here to auto start, as if it were a terminal command. So if I wanted to start sxhkd, for example, I'll just type in sxhkd, or I can put it here and it'll auto start. So that way I can actually use BSPWM once I boot into it. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention, you're also going to want to install Picom and Fey. Picom is a compositor which basically lets you do all these sort of like cool effects and stuff. So transparency, shadows, rounded corners, those are all things that are they require a compositor. So if you want that sort of stuff, then definitely get one. I recommend Picom or Picom ibhagwan git, which is the ibhagwan fork of it, which has blur and rounded corners. Fey, it's an image viewer, but it also serves as a wallpaper setter. That's why I have it at my auto start here. If I have a folder here, stuff, wallpapers, and I just have one, so it doesn't change when I refresh BSPWM. But yeah, this is going to be important if you want any sort of like background or wallpaper. Xrender rate 144. This is just to make my monitor refresh at 144 Hz. If you don't have a high refresh rate monitor, then don't worry about that. And I also have a launch script for Polybar. If I cd into there real quick, Polybar launch.shell. Oops. Then you can see here, it's basically just a really quick script. It just has 3 commands, but it's more efficient than running all those 3 commands. So you can see it kills Polybar, waits a little bit, and then creates Polybar again. So if I refresh, you'll see it'll fade in and out for a second. So the next line here is your workspaces. I never use more than 5, so I just have these 5 workspaces, but if you ever wanted to, you could add as many as you want. So for example, if I did that, you can see I have an extra workspace over here. By default it'll have 9, I think, but I just like 5 because I never use more than that. And then the other stuff here, it's just a little bit of extra eye candy, I guess. The border width, I typically don't really like borders, but if you want to, you can add them. It basically just shows what screen what you're selecting, right? And the window gap is, as you can see, the gap between windows. So if I set it to 0, for example, there's no gap at all. And if, whoops, sorry about that. If I set it to 50, then you can see there's a very big gap. I usually keep it between 10 and 20, but you can set it to whatever you like. And the last thing here, the split ratio, is basically just when you open up a new terminal, there's going to be a new ratio. You can see it doesn't split exactly down the middle. If I set this to like 80% or something, you can see when I open it up, it'll be a very, very small ratio. And it doesn't, I think it's kind of buggy if you set it to something below 50. Or not, actually. Yeah, it's just kind of weird. So I would just keep it above 50 most of the time. I have it at 60 right now. And that's pretty much it for the bspwmrc. That's a very simple config. You can also adjust the color of your border if you do decide to have a border enabled. But I don't do that, so you can just find somebody else's dot files. So now let's go over the sxhkd, which is the simple X hotkey daemon. Basically, it's supposed to be used with BSPWM. You can use other ones if you like, but this is just the one that I use because it's made by the same guy and it's relatively easy to configure. So you can see here I have quite a few shortcuts. By default, it comes with a lot of stuff that I find unnecessary, so I just remove stuff that I don't really use ever. But it's pretty simple to get this config up and running. So by default, it'll already have a shortcut for your terminal, for D menu, and all of that stuff, and it's really, really easy to edit it. So for example, you can see right now I have super plus D for my Firefox, but I could set it to anything else. You know, I could do super S, or I already have a hotkey for that, super C, for example. And then, okay, I think I have something else. Oh, what the heck? Sorry about that. Okay, but yeah, it's really, really easy to create a new shortcut for sxhkd. It's always good to have a comment just so you don't forget what it is. So for example, I just deleted my Firefox one real quick. You can see it's relatively easy to just add a new one. I can do super plus D and then Firefox. So if I save, reload, then you can see I don't have to do anything. And you can also, I just leave the default binds for all this stuff, for full screen and tiled and S and moving floating windows and stuff around. The only main other thing that I did is this brightness and temperature script. It basically allows me to adjust my monitor's brightness and temperature without having to go into the terminal, because BSPWM sadly doesn't have that built in. So I have this script, I didn't make it, but it should be on my GitHub, I think. If I go into here, it's called brightness.sh, right? Brightness.sh. Okay. Yeah, I have the brightness script there. Basically, it lets you adjust, like I said before, adjust the temperature and brightness of your screen really easily and quickly. So I just have Alt 1, 2, 3, 4, and just adjusting the temperature and brightness. And this script will be on my GitHub, and then you can just copy this code if you want that as well. So what else do we have? Okay, so color schemes. Color schemes are pretty important when it comes to a nice and cohesive looking system. I have mine for, you can see there's my color scheme. I actually made it myself. I based it off another one called Horizon for VS Code, but there are a lot of popular color schemes out there that are pre-made. A few of them are Dracula. This one, I think it's pretty nice. It has a nice sort of like purple tint and look. I think it's pretty cool. A lot of people don't really like it, but it's interesting. You can see that's how it looks. There's also one called Nord. This one again, it's just nice and basic. It's sort of like a more bluish approach, and yeah, it just looks nice. Then there's also one called Groovebox. Groovebox is sort of more like brown and green, I guess. It's originally for Vim, but there are a lot of ports to other stuff. Excuse me. You can see it looks nice and retro. So those are all a few color schemes that you can build off of. It's relatively easy to port color schemes to other apps, so if you make your own, it shouldn't be too hard to port it to other things, but I have mine. I'm calling it Dawn. It's on my GitHub, and I also have a Vim scheme for it. But yeah, if you wanted to theme like Discord, for example, I themed it to my color scheme, Dawn. You can see it has the matching colors here, and that's because I used a Discord CSS loader called Better Discord. So that actually ties in pretty nicely to my next point, which is customizing Discord. So Discord, I'm sure you all know what it is. It's a popular chatting app, and by default it looks pretty ugly in my opinion. So I use this thing called Better Discord. It's a CSS loader that also has a few other features like transparency. So if you want the transparency, I would recommend Better Discord. If you don't want that at all, there's a lot of other ones that don't have it that are a lot more minimal, like Disco CSS or Enhanced Discord. But I think this one's just the easiest to set up. Plus, it has transparency. So if we go here, I have this theme. It's an edited version of somebody else's theme called Frosted Glass. It should be on my GitHub, but it's fairly easy to customize Discord as long as you know a little bit of CSS. I don't, so I pretty much just stole this guy's scheme and edited the colors. But so if you know a little bit of CSS, you can just go ahead and do that yourself. And there's also a theme library on this website, Better Discord Library. You can see there's all of these different themes that you can grab for yourself. So what's next? Oh yeah, the terminals. So like I said at the start, I use urxvt or urxvt Unicode. I like it a lot. It's minimal and it's fast, but when it comes to customizing it, it's not that hard. So this one it's built on, or sorry, it's not built on. Its configuration file is called .xresources. It should, if you install urxvt, it should create one in your home directory, and if it doesn't, then just go ahead and make it. And it's pretty easy to configure, so I don't really like the scroll bar. I think it's ugly, so excuse me. So I disabled it here. I set the foreground to white, just to make it nice and easy to read. I set the internal border, or the padding, to 15. Padding is basically just a little bit of spacing around the edges so that the text isn't directly up there. I think a little bit of it, like 15, looks pretty good. I have hack as my font at size 11. And this is just to set the transparency. Then I also set the DPI to 96 and anti-alias the font. Now here is my color scheme. I used a website called terminal.sexy to make it. It's, sorry, let me just disable my uBlock. It's actually really, really good. It's nice and user-friendly, and it makes a lot of sense. So you can basically just go ahead and customize every color here. And then there's also this this preview over here. So if I wanted to make this like all black, you could do that. I don't know why you'd want to, but you could. And then there's a lot of different formats to import and export it to. So since I'm using urxvt, I'll just export it to xresources and hit export. And that's a really useful tool if you want to make your own color schemes. So Picom, like I said before, it's the compositor, or what basically makes all of the like the extra details and stuff. So I'm using just the mainline Picom. I'm not using any forks that have blur or rounded corners or anything. There is one fork by bspwm, who, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but it has support for blur and rounded corners. I personally don't really like those, but if you do, you can go ahead and install that, and it's fairly easy to configure. So I like the look of shadows when it's nice and subtle. I have them at a radius of 16, a small offset, and 35% opacity. And then I just went ahead and disabled it for D menu and Polybar because it looks really weird when it's on those. Fading, it's essentially like like an animation when things open or close. So you can see once I disabled it, everything's just super snappy. If you like that, then you can just disable it or cut it out entirely. I like it a little bit, it just makes everything flow a bit more, but you can just disable it to your liking. And then just a few other things, I enabled VSync and DBE and set the backend to GLX. This just makes the whole experience a lot nicer, a lot smoother essentially. And there is another thing, I think it's called inactive dim. I don't know if that's the correct. Yeah, you can see. If you, it basically makes all the other inactive windows super, not necessarily super dark, you can set it to whatever value you like, but it basically darkens all the other inactive windows. I don't really like it, so I don't use it, but if you do, you can just go ahead and use that. So, now let's talk about Bash. If you're using ZSH or Fish or anything, I'm sorry, I don't know those shells, so I can't really help you. But Bash, it's essentially the default shell for Linux and Mac OS, and you can customize it quite a bit. So the default Bash prompt, I find it pretty ugly. It's basically this starting thing here. It'll have like your host name and then the location. I just think it's a bunch of unnecessary stuff. So to change it, you have to add this PS1 thing at the top. I'm pretty sure there's already one somewhere in the default bash RC. But yeah. So I just put a \w that just shows where you are. So if I cd into .config, then you can see I can still see where I am. And this $, just so it's a nice little separator. If you wanted to set it as, you can really customize it to do whatever you want. So if you wanted that, you can have that. And then there's also a lot of other things. I'm not going to cover them because I think they're just unnecessary, but if you check there's a lot of resources online. You can add like the date and the time and all of that cool stuff. Now, this isn't necessarily BSPWM or any tiling window manager in particular, but I like to set aliases. They are super useful. They make everything a lot faster. So you might have seen that when I edit my config files, I just type like P, for example, and it takes me to Picom. Oops. Or if I wanted to edit my bash prompt, I would just do BA, and those are super useful. And so essentially how to do that, you want to go into your bash RC file, you do, as long as you're in your home directory, you do sudo vim .bashrc. And all you have to do is write alias, whatever you want the command to be, and then equals, and whatever you want it to execute. So you can see, for example, I have v as sudo vim, so I don't have to type sudo vim every time, I just type v, or c to clear, and yeah, that's just really convenient, especially when you're editing your dot files a lot like I am. So you can see here I have this nice bar at the top, It's called Polybar, and it's pretty robust, I would say. Excuse me. There's a lot of other bars out there. A lot of window managers like DWM, Xmonad, i3. They have their own bars built in, but BSPWM doesn't. So I use Polybar. It's pretty, like I said before, it's pretty easy to configure. It works by creating a bunch of different modules that you can add to your bar. And yeah, so there's a lot of modules that are made by other people or that come built in. For example, there's a CPU module. So if I wanted to test my CPU percentage, I can just add that there and it'll be there. Or right now you can see I have the date and workspaces module. So yeah, this guy, he has a lot of different Polybar themes, you can see, and I just customized it for myself. I basically removed a lot of stuff and changed the colors. So I don't really know how to customize Polybar very well, so there's a lot of other resources online for customizing it. I would recommend Mac, spelled M-A-K-C's tutorial. It goes pretty in depth, and it even helps you create your own modules. So that's pretty cool. But essentially, yeah, that's pretty much it. It works based off of modules, and then you can create your own and add them wherever you like, and tweak the colors, all that stuff. Alright, so the last thing is going to be configuring GTK and GTK apps. For this, you're going to want to use something called alxappearance. So alxappearance is basically a GUI editor for GTK themes. If you don't know what GTK is, it's essentially a framework for building widgets and GUI apps. So for example, my file manager Nautilus, it uses GTK, so you can see here that all the colors match because I made my own GTK theme. But there's a lot of other stuff, like I'm pretty sure Firefox uses it, most file managers use it, and it's just all around good to have a matching GTK theme. It just helps tie everything together. So alxappearance, it's similar to a lot of GUI editors for like other desktop environments. I'm pretty sure it comes from the LXDE desktop environment. But you can see I have all of these different GTK themes. So for example, if I wanted to use this one, Plata Noir, you can see it just changed the theme right there. And if I change back, then it changes back. This also it's possible to configure GTK by using a text file, but it's just a lot easier to use a GUI for it, like alxappearance. It also lets you adjust your font, your icons. You basically, yeah, it just lets you choose whatever the heck you want. I use Papyrus. I think it looks nice. The cursor and the fonts, and yeah, it's just essentially a good way to organize everything and keep it all tied together. And if you ever wanted to make your own GTK theme or install one from the internet, the way to get it into alxappearance is you have to create, you won't always have to create them, but most of the time these don't exist. You have to create a .icons folder and a .themes folder. And as soon as you have those, you just have to download the folder, or if it's from the internet, you download the zip file, unzip it, and then place it in .icons. So I have here the Umox balloon. That's just what came out of Umox. So that's my theme for icons, and my theme for well, just the other stuff like Nautilus. And Umox is essentially just a good tool for creating your own GTK themes. It's sort of like terminal.sexy, but for GTK. Unfortunately, on Solus, it's not available in the repositories, so I can't demonstrate. But it's really user-friendly. You should be able to figure it out yourself. You basically just go in there, edit the colors, edit the widgets for whatever you want, however you want it to look, export it, and then just drop it in your .themes. And then if you go into LX Appearance, you should be able to select it, and there you go. That'll be it. So yeah, that's pretty much it when it comes to doing a full system rice, I guess. So yeah, that's pretty much it. I hope you enjoyed. I hope this can help you out, and yeah, I'll see you next time.